Hello and welcome to this new edition of the Bourdieu Monday Report. The conflict in the Middle East continues with an intensity that remains high. We are entering the third week of war, and unfortunately, no tangible sign of de-escalation is in sight. On the contrary, the American army bombed Karg Island over the weekend, through which 90% of the oil exported by Iran passes, and the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. We are obviously following the evolution of the situation closely to know if our allocations should be adjusted or not, because as we have already said, the transmission channel to the global economy passes through the evolution of barrel prices. Now, oil prices have crossed an important threshold and are reaching $100 per barrel. They are up 75% since the beginning of the year. The European economy, for its part, is more affected by gas prices, which, as we see on the graph, have practically doubled since the beginning of the year. We are still far from previous historical peaks, but it is undeniable that a sustainably high energy price environment will eventually penalize growth and inflation prospects. Just last week, we had the publication in the United States of inflation figures for the month of February, and those for household confidence. These publications did not really come as a surprise in the sense that inflation is not yet impacted by recent increases in energy prices. Price growth of 2.5% over 1 year in February is rather stable, but it will rise at a time when, as we see on the graph on the right, household confidence measured by the University of Michigan is declining and at a rather low level. We can clearly see that if price growth were to accelerate sustainably, the American consumer risks reducing their spending quite quickly and thus causing a more or less marked slowdown in activity. We therefore remain at the level of financial markets in an environment that is rather risk-off. Only the American dollar is in positive territory over the past week. It is up 1.4% in addition naturally to oil, which itself is progressing by more than 10%. Equities are down everywhere, by -2% in emerging markets and Switzerland, and by 1.5% in the United States. Europe is doing a little better and is only down 0.5%. 10-year sovereign rates are rising by more than 10 basis points in the United States and the Eurozone, causing bond prices to fall by about 1%. Gold is suffering from the rise in interest rates and the appreciation of the dollar and is recording a drop of just over 2%. This week, we will have the monetary policy decisions of the Fed in the United States and the European Central Bank in the Eurozone. Both central banks should keep their respective key rates unchanged. But the most important thing will be in the speeches of the officials. Powell in the United States and Lagarde in Frankfurt will have to give some indications on how they plan to manage the evolution of the situation. Since the start of the conflict, markets are now only expecting one rate cut compared to almost 3 previously in the United States. In the Eurozone, markets are now anticipating more than one interest rate hike compared to a status quo that prevailed before the start of the conflict. Therefore, slightly more dovish speeches, namely slightly more accommodating ones from central bankers, could cause quite significant movements in the markets. That's all for today. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you next week.